Asia is the world's most dynamic region, the future of the international order. Security, trade, and the global economy will be shaped by developments in this region. Asia is also the most important geopolitical theatre of the 21st century. Increasing competition between the US and China, the emergence of new alliances, and the reorganization of global supply chains are reshaping the geopolitical landscapes of the region. At the same time, the European Union has adopted a new strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific and seeks to play a more active role in Asia.
Well, the overall purpose of U.S. policy towards South Korea is safeguarding the alliance relationship. You know, that is a special relationship that was formed way back during the Korean War and made official treaty in 1953 at the end of the war and has persisted all those decades. So that is the framework for everything, is how to keep that alliance strong. But then within that alliance, there's disagreements, there's tensions, and there's differing priorities. At this point for U.S. policy in the region, really everything is about China. China is emerging, and the U.S. Strategic competition with China is emerging as the organizing principle for U.S. power and presence in the region. And so that's transforming the alliance in terms of Americans are looking to South Korea for support with the China strategy, but also recognizing that South Korea takes a slightly different view of how to manage the relationship. South Korea feels very much in between these two powers, is heavily dependent economically on China, and so South Korea has to manage all these dynamics a bit differently. That, I would say, is the overarching driving force right now in the relationship and for U.S. policy.
South Korean position is very clear. You know, we wanted to maintain existing alliance relationship with the United States while maintaining strategic cooperative partnership with China. Okay? And therefore, our government is trying to merge through two competing rivals. Okay? It won't be easy, but our government will do our best to make a balance between the two. But let me tell you one thing very clear. Ally is more important than strategic partner. That's a fact. Okay? However, we cannot abandon China for the sake of the United States. Therefore, it will be a very difficult diplomatic task for us. But our government will continue to try to merge through between the two competing rivals. And also, we are trying to prevent the rise of new Cold War between the US and China.
U.S.-China rivalry is the dilemma for South Korean diplomacy in the near term, probably in the long term. I mean, this looks like the trend that's going to dominate the 21st century. And here you've got a country in South Korea that is geographically in between the two, and you can't move. There's nowhere to go. And in terms of security and economy, South Korea relies obviously primarily on the military alliance with the United States, but is quite vulnerable in contingencies to its proximity to China. And with the tense relationship with North Korea, South Korea could find itself a battleground in a way that's almost unimaginable now. But you could foresee if we extend these trends of hostility between the United States and China. So that's a very dangerous position for South Korea to be in geographically. On top of that, you have the economic vulnerability where a quarter of Korea's trade dependency is on China. And we saw some years back over disputes with missile defense deployment. The THAAD capability was put here in South Korea, and China really punished South Korea economically for that, and that could happen again. So whether South Koreans like it or not, in political and in economic and geographic terms, they are caught between US-China rivalry. And South Korea does not have the weight to solve that problem. South Korea is going to have to manage that problem very nimbly for not just years, but really for decades.
이 한반도 정세는 남북 관계만 갖고 해석할 수가 없습니다. 우리가 한국 전쟁도 내전이면서 또 국제전이고 미중 관계의 영향이 한반도 정세에도 매우 결정적으로 영향을 미친 게 지난 역사죠. 미중 관계가 좋을 때는 남북 관계도 풀리는 것이고 미중 관계가 악화되면은 남북 관계도 어렵습니다. 북핵 문제의 경우 과거에도 보면은 우리가 뭐 육자회담도 했고 육자회담 사례에서도 마찬가지로 미중 간의 협력이 전제가 됐기 때문에 북한의 핵 문제를 해결할 수 있었고 또 북핵 문제의 상응 조치, 북핵 문제를 해결하기 위해서는 한반도 평화 체제, 지금 종전선언이라든가 평화협정이라든가 이런 부분들은 결국에 중국의 참여가 없이는 어렵습니다. 그런 차원에서 보면은 미중 간의 전략 경쟁이 특히 군사 분야에서 점점 더 강도가 세지는 건데 그런 부분들은 한반도 평화에 지금 부정적으로 작용을 하고 있다. 그리고 그것이 한국 외교에서 해결해야 될 가장 중요하고 시급한 과제다 이렇게 생각합니다.
The big question with US-China rivalry and how it affects inter-Korean relations is how North Korea wants to play this. South Korea, we can be pretty sure, is going to maintain that strong foundation of the alliance with the United States, but try not to upset China. So it's kind of a given. North Korea's position is less clear. North Korea is China's only defense treaty ally in the world. That's quite remarkable. However, if you know the history and the dynamics in that alliance relationship, it's nothing compared to the strength of the alliance between South Korea and the United States, for example. So it's a very brittle and distrustful relationship that exists between North Korea and China. And the question is, going forward, as this rivalry intensifies between Washington and Beijing, does Pyongyang test the waters of improving its relationship with the United States in order to gain some strategic maneuvering room because it doesn't want to be dominated by China, it doesn't want to be entirely dependent on China for its defense, for its economic growth, for all these things. We saw in 2018, we saw hints of Kim Jong-un making a strategic play where he moved over toward the United States and South Korea. And that made China nervous. He was careful, so he started visiting China for the first time. But you could see what he was doing. That process fell apart for complicated reasons. The question going forward is, do we see a resumption of that? And really, I hate to use this metaphor, but the ball is in Kim Jong-un's court. If he wants to play that game, I think he'll probably find willing partners in Washington and Seoul, but he's gonna have to show that inclination to play the US-China rivalry. The last thing I'd say is, if North Korea decides to play a little both sides of the US-China rivalry, that will be very familiar to older North Koreans. That's what they did throughout the Cold War, where they played both sides of the rivalry between the Soviet Union and China, which, although they were communists, was quite heated and divisive. So North Korea knows how to do this, and one of the interesting questions is whether they decide to go that route or not.
미중 전략 경쟁이 본격화되는 시점이었지만은 한반도에서는 군사 분야라든가 정치 분야라든가 이 한반도는 미중 전략 경쟁이 벌어지지 않는, 다시 얘기해서 미중 협력이 경쟁과는 다르게 펼쳐질 수 있는 기회가 있었다. 그런데 결국 하노이 회담에서 실패하게 되고, 당연히 북한은 미중 전략 경쟁이라는 구도에 올라탄 거죠. 결국 중국하고의 중국밖에 믿을 수밖에 없다. 그리고 무역이나 이런 부분들 관련돼서도 대부분이 중국하고 하고 있는 거기 때문에, 그때 이후로 중국은 또 미중 전략 경쟁에서 북한의 필요가 있고, 북한은 어쩔 수 없이 중국에 의존할 수밖에 없는 그런 상황이 2019년 2월 하노이 회담 실패 이후에 전개됐다, 이렇게 봅니다. 그러니까 북한은 지금도 미중 전략 경쟁에서 여러 가지 인권 문제라든가 기타 여러 가지 문제들에 대해서 중국하고 입장을 같이 하고 있습니다. 그래서 북한의 핵 능력이 고조화된 상황 속에서 미중 전략 경쟁이 덧붙여진 매우 어려운 상황입니다. 그렇기 때문에 협상을 시작하고 또 협상을 성공시키기 위해서는 중국의 참여와 역할이 불가피합니다. 그렇기 때문에 한국도 미국하고 얘기할 때는 북핵 문제를 성공시키기 위해서는 미중 간의 대화가 필요하다. 그리고 미중 간의 전략 경쟁을 하더라도 북핵 문제에 대해서는 협력이 필요하다라는 입장입니다. 그런 부분들에 대해서는 미국도 북핵 문제를 해결하려고 한다면은 중국하고의 대화가 그리고 긴밀한 협의가 필요할 거라고 생각합니다.
Therefore, I would be extremely cautious about the idea that the European Union should be involved in the militarily by joining the US while containing China. I would say that's a wrong choice. But European Union involved in Indo-Pacific area to mitigate the potential for conflict, okay, and promote multilateral security cooperation in this part of the world. That is really welcome in addition.
It is important for me to underline that Korea is one, if not the key partner in the region with which Germany and the European Union as a whole, we share values and interests. We intensively consult on issues like trade, industry, but also on new topics like cybersecurity, cooperation in third markets, but also on issues like energy, environment and climate. And now I think the opportunity with the Indo-Pacific guidelines is both for Germany as well as for the European Union that we intensify our political dialogue, we intensify cooperating on global issues like environment and climate, but also that we have intensified cooperation on security issues in the region and seeking also ways to cooperate with third countries, for example on topics very much on the agenda like connectivity and digital trade.
Well, let me come back to the Indo-Pacific strategy because we have the answers there. Certainly this is a strategy for us that is all-inclusive. It is not, and we have said it many times, it's not a strategy against anyone. Of course, not against China. And there is a strategy about cooperation and not confrontation. And I think Korea, as I said before, feels itself very comfortable in that sort of strategy. So it's not a strategy of confrontation, as I said before. It's a strategy of cooperation, of collaboration, of re-engagement. And I think Korea feels itself also in the same line. And as I said also before, it's a strategy which has multilateralism at its core and a rule-based international order to solve conflicts and to solve tensions. With China, there is a lot of ideas and proposals in the Indo-Pacific strategy with China. Of course, we reach out to China bilaterally. We have very close cooperation. There are many challenges and many issues that we have to do together. It's also an economic competitor, of course, but we have to there assure that our interests are well balanced, that our companies have a level playing field with Chinese companies. And certainly it's a systemic rival, as we said, because we don't agree on the system of governance. We have different system of governance, and that doesn't mean that we cannot just not speak out. We do speak out in many of the issues we see that are happening, that we think are not adequate, and we just come with also with measures. So I think that with close partners you can be able to also deal with all these dimensions of our relation, and I think Korea feels also comfortable with that.
The geopolitical landscape of Asia will continue to change in the years to come, creating a complex pattern of competition, cooperation, and conflict. South Korea, as a strategically important middle power, will play an important role in shaping the new geopolitics of the region. We should all keep an eye on how things will unfold in the coming years.